Down a little. Click that button that says, click that red round button right there. Yep, click that one. So there's a great partnership between our two organizations, and it came as a result, I'm going to say mostly because Todd Gloria said, we want to make our city 100% renewable. Maybe you remember that. We had that presentation a few months ago, and it was part of the Climate Action Plan. And we had a meeting here, and there was 4 other cities in California that are already 100% renewable, and those are on the website there now. So if they can do it, we ought to be able to do it as well. We're further south. We got more sun than they do, right? So, and scroll down a little bit more, Ron. We do have 3 partners in this: the Equinox Center, Climate Act. Oh, too far. Go back a little further up. Climate Action Campaign. That's Nicole Capretz working on that climate action on the Climate Action Campaign for the city to drive that into reality. And then the U.S. Green Chamber, and John Reeves is here tonight. He's one of our co-partners here for the U.S. Green Chamber, so thank you for that. And who else is here do we need to acknowledge besides our speakers? Anybody else specifically? Bryony real soon. The Equinox Center. Oh yeah, Equinox Center. They just put out this great dashboard. If you haven't seen that yet, it's their 2015 dashboard of trends for our city and how we're doing better or worse on about 15 different criteria. What would you like to say to these people to welcome them and tell them what Renewable Energy Society is? Go ahead.
Sure. San Diego Renewable Energy Society, like Peter mentioned, we're embarking on making San Diego 100% renewable. We're always looking for people to get involved and help us out with the initiatives that we're doing. So if you are interested or know anybody who is, please, you can direct them to our website. It's sdres.org, or you can email me at chair@sdres.org, and we'll definitely have things to do, and we thank you all for coming out. Also, there's the EcoFest Encinitas. Is going to be going on May 17th. It's from 10 to 4. If anybody's interested in volunteering for that, they need volunteers. So again, you can get in touch with me at chair@sdres.org, and I'll forward your information on to them if you're interested. All right, thank you.
Their Earth Day up in Encinitas, right?
Yes.
And if you're interested, if you are committed to this as sort of a pledge, hit that little red button right there when you get to that website and fill out the form and take the pledge to be involved as a 100% renewable partner in this initiative yourself. So we'd love to have you do that. With that, we have 3 outstanding speakers tonight. They're engineers, leading architects, efficiency engineers in the city. And how do you take a facility, existing or new, and make it net zero? So that's sort of just a brief introduction. What I'd like to do is introduce Bryony, and your last name. Help me out here. I'll tell you have a mic on. Stand up. Bryony has taken on the role for us of being the point person for this 100% renewable initiative. So if you want to help out, volunteer, get involved, do something with the website, this lady has been phenomenal. You'll see it in just a few seconds, some of the setup work that she's done to kind of prepare you for tonight. And so with that, Bryony, go right ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bryony Fontel. Can we do something with the mic?
No, that's good.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
I can hear myself.
Yeah.
Is that normal? Okay. Okay, I'm just going to give you a bit of an introductory presentation. I don't know if you're all at the same level of knowledge of what zero net buildings are. A few weeks ago, I actually didn't know anything about zero net buildings. So I've been trying to learn as much as possible so that I could give, in just a few slides, a very basic presentation on what we're talking about today. I'm actually going to start here. In terms of energy, last year, 41% of the total US energy consumption was through residential and commercial buildings. And this was mostly through space heating, lighting, water heating, all the things you would think of also. But if you look at this 41%, it's such an important part of the whole energy portfolio that with the zero net buildings, this is what we want to try reduce. So zero net energy buildings are buildings that produce as much clean energy as they use over the course of a year. And that's done through 2 things. One, through different building design to minimize the energy requirements. And Beth is going to tell you more about all of that. And obviously through renewable energy systems that meet those reduced needs. So today, there are different organizations that are looking at how many zero net buildings there are. And right now there's about, how much is that? More than 150 commercial buildings that are zero net energy in North America. The number of projects is going up. It's not huge yet, but it's growing. And what I found interesting is a few of these data points here. The first one is that 24% of the projects right now are renovated existing buildings. So zero net energy buildings don't all have to be completely new buildings. They can be, we can use the existing buildings. What's also interesting is that most of these buildings use about a quarter of the energy that average buildings use. So that's a big improvement without having to put up the solar panels yet. They can be in all climate zones. So we have them here, but you could also have them in winter areas. And they're found in 16 types of buildings, where education is actually one of the most often used ones. In San Diego, we have a few zero net energy commercial buildings. I think the first one, I hope I'm right on this one, is in 2009, this architect firm, Hannah Gabriel Wells, they built their first zero net energy building. And they actually used an existing building, and more than 90% of the materials that they used were already there. So they didn't have to set up a whole new building. And they use 100% natural ventilation, and they have all these design elements that they put in there and solar panels at the same time. The second notable office was the DPR office, DPR construction office. And they also used an existing structure. I think they used, I don't remember exactly what they used. But they also used, it was a 1984 structure, and they used 95% of that they managed to change the design and to make zero net energy building. And then now, of course, most of you must have heard about this. The largest net zero energy commercial office in the country is here also, in San Diego also. 13 stories, 415,000 square feet. So it's a big project, so it gives us hope. In terms of residential buildings, I wasn't able to find the statistics of how many there are because people have their own homes and they're not all recording everything. But we see them coming out in the news more and more. There's one in Denmark there. In San Diego, there's one. There's a few also. There's even an apartment complex. And there's even a community that's supposed to be a net zero that's being built at the same moment. So California is playing a leading role in adopting net zero buildings. If you go online and you want to look for net zero buildings, you see California buildings come up all the time. So that's great. And through the revised Title 24, there's new goals. And these goals are very ambitious. The goals are that all new residential buildings are supposed to be zero net energy by 2020. By 2020, that's in 5 years, so that's great. And all new commercial buildings should also be zero net by 2030. And at the same time, 50% of the existing commercial structures should also be there. That's, in my view, it seems very ambitious, and I hope we'll get there. And I think it's possible also. And there's other activities and incentives that California is doing. There's technical assistance and incentives for owners and design teams. The governor does, the state also wants to show that they're involved in this or building zero net energy initiatives at the same time. They're investing in new technologies and in research. And there's incentives for rooftop, for example, and for other green technologies. So I think that's what I can share with you. And I'd like to pass the word to Beth, because Beth knows a lot more about this, and she can give you more details of how everything works in terms of zero net energy.
Great. Beth's bio is up here. Actually, all their bios are up here. I'm not going to read them entirely. I just want to acknowledge Beth. I met her, I bet, 30 years ago, and she was the first person I knew that was actually going into a building and say, you know, it's smarter to save energy because the less you use, the more savings that you have. And nobody was doing that at the time. And now I know she's been a leader in the organization and a leader in San Diego, so it's thrilling to have her here because this is an industry that has flourished around the country and around the world. So Beth was one of the lead people in San Diego that started this movement. Just so you know, also these buildings that you see on 1 through 5 over here, these are all net zero buildings around the country as well. And we loved them because they're beautiful. Because a net zero building can also be beautiful as well. So those are a few that Bryony found. So before Beth gets started, I need all of your help that are working on the laptops. All right. So what you need to do is hit escape. Top left button is escape on the keyboard. And at the bottom, you'll see a bunch of PowerPoints that come up. And Beth, the one that says right here, what it'll say, Brummett, it says Jeannie May 2015 Brummett. If it says Jeannie May 2015 Brummett, would you click on that? We all should see that very first slide come up pretty quickly. Very good, even on restart theater. And then with your cursor, go up where it says the slideshow up at the top. Go to the slideshow at the top. Okay, and then you can start. And we want you to click to the number of the slide that you're at the computer that you're at. So, but okay, we're going to hold on you guys, all right? She's going to go through 1 through 10. So you'll actually have on number 2 over here. Jonathan, we want you to click down 1. So you're at number 2. Number 3, you're on that one. So I want you to go under where it says at the top, slideshow. See where it says slideshow at the top where I'm pointing? All right. And then you can say from current slide. Go ahead and click over here where I'm pointing where it says from current slide. See where I'm pointing over there? You can go down to 3 if you want. There you go. Click. So that's the 3rd slide. And there are numbers. She numbered these all along the bottom. So if you can find your number in the bottom right-hand corner, that will help. And so we're already 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you go ahead and get started, and I'll make sure everybody else is caught on, okay?
There you go.
There you go.
Well, Peter, thank you very much. Certainly you were a leader just as early as I was, and it was really fun to have known each other as this industry has been really developing and growing. So thank you for that introduction, Bryony, to the topic of Z&E, and this will be fun as we have myself and Phil and Bill, and we're all going to kind of, let's see, we're going to be like birds and grasshoppers tonight as we connect with what's been said and what we'd like to talk about is for this next little while. Organize this into 3 basic parts. As you can see on slide 2, the first part will talk about what is Z&E and the California goals. I've already set that up. Let me make a quick change here.
Where's it at? Is it in your pocket?
No, I've just moved it from my jacket to my shirt.
Okay.
And we'll see if it's got less skips in it, fewer skips. Then we'll talk a little bit about commercial buildings and a little bit about residential buildings. And if you have questions, clarifications along the way, please shout out. Otherwise, we've got a lot of material to cover, and we will have more questions and discussions after all 3 of us have had a chance to talk with you a little bit. So let's go to start with to what is high performance? We talk about Z&E and high performance buildings. So you will often hear me say that the path to high performance and the path to Z&E is the same path. The question is how far down that path you go. And what is a high-performance building? So we've heard about the triple bottom line. I think it's always valuable to be remembering that it's not just about energy, but this is really about the quality of the building for the people who are living in that building. There's a lot more we can talk about that. We want healthier, and those come from a combination of happier people and lower energy costs. And this translates into, of course, a healthier environment. We're polluting less. The environment around us, we're taking less from it. And in an ideal sense, we're actually even contributing back to the health of that. So we're talking high performance buildings. That's why we talk high performance instead of just high efficiency. Because high performance buildings are looking at the entire triple bottom line, healthier people, healthier places, and healthier places. So Bryony gave us a start. What is ZNE? And yes, it was very appropriate to identify, ZNE, it's an annual basis over a 1-year period of time, how much energy is consumed. And we can look at a building, or we can look at a project or a campus of buildings, how much energy is consumed, and how much, generally we're looking at how much on-site renewable energy is produced to offset that energy. So technically, from a geek point of view, when we say ZNE, the E stands for energy. But what most people hear when they hear ZNE is zero net electricity. Because, of course, we talk a lot about photovoltaic panels offsetting our energy. What we actually care about for California's greenhouse gas goals and the world's greenhouse gas goals is emissions. So we have different emissions that come from different power sources, whether those power sources are creating electricity, for example. And of course, gas has emissions of a different kind. Some people say zero net energy. What they're really thinking is net energy cost, as you saw on the title that Jeannie sent out. We think of, wow, I'm going to have $0. Well, that's not necessarily the case for most buildings that remain connected to the grid. And there are really important reasons why that's true. And let me say but we'll talk about that later. In California, we're looking at TDV energy. And the site and source is basically, once it crosses the site boundary to that building, and source is back at the power plant. So we all have seen these big transmission lines that march across the landscapes. So by the time power is generated at the power plant, generally with a fossil fuel, but could be other sources, and turned into electricity, it takes 3 units of electricity at the power plant in order to get 1 unit of electricity at our site. And my guess is Bill can tell us a lot more about that. Those efficiencies are getting a little bit better. It's a really, really big loss. So on-site generation is valuable. So when we talk about ZNE, the definition isn't simple. And what people are thinking about in their minds isn't necessarily the same thing. So one of the important things when you approach a project or design a policy is to get a better definition about what are we going to talk about for this purpose? What's the right metric to use for the project that we're talking about? What most people look at is a metric that we're going to, here's the geek part of it. It's site-based KBTUs per square foot per year. And we're going to just simplify that and call it energy use intensity. The industry calls that energy use intensity, EUI. That is not the definition that the state of California is using for its big, bold goals. But that's the definition that we're mostly using when we're designing for zero net energy buildings. Other things that you hear in the ZNE conversations, ZNE, as you looked, Bryony put up a slide from the New Buildings Institute. So they are tracking projects that are verified to be zero net energy, and they're using this EUI definition. And to be verified, it has to have been in operation for at least a year. Most of the time when we're talking Title 24, we're talking about design of buildings which haven't been built or occupied yet. So verified is a 1-year real utility bill that identifies the performance of that building. We also might be ZNE capable, or ZNE capable might be a building design. It might be, as we'll see in our next set of slides, a building can be prepared zero net energy, but then the people in that building might operate that building in a higher intensity way than another set of occupants might. If we look at our cars over here, how many people own a car? Most of us. How many people know when you bought that car what its factory gas mileage rating was? Okay, how many MPG was the factory rating for that car? Okay, so when you had that MPG, did that tell you how many dollars per month it's going to take you to operate that car? Of course, not at all. So that's the you can have a building which is designed to be Z&E capable, which is like a factory rating for a building. But then how is that building actually going to operate in real time and in a real life? That's like, how do you actually drive your car? How many miles, how much load, how much maintenance do you do on your tires and keeping your engine maintained and efficient? So that's a very similar example when we're talking about buildings. We can solve it at the building scale or at the community scale, and if we can't solve it at the building scale for offset of renewable energy, then we have an option under some metrics to go outside and buy, in effect, renewable energy credits. So let's say that on my site it's too tight, I can't put up enough PV on my roof to offset the electricity anyway of my building. So I'm going to buy some portion of someone else's renewable energy somewhere else. And that's called a renewable energy credit, so the electrons balance out, but not on the site. And then Z&E verified is when it's actually been proved after a 1-year period of time. So Brianna already talked about the big, bold goals for California, and you can see that this is just emphasizing that there's our new construction goals and the existing building stock goals. I think new construction is crucially important, because what it identifies is what potential, what's the potential of design? If we just look at existing buildings and say, wow, how do we make them better? This is just like feels like a hill to climb to most people. How do you retrofit the energy efficiency, drive the efficiency down? How do you take a roof that's already cluttered up with mechanical systems and pipes and get clean space to add renewable energy of any kind? So it's a tougher problem to solve with existing buildings. New buildings show us what's possible. But of course, almost all of the building stock out there, almost all of that energy pie in the country that's being used by buildings is being used by our existing building stock. So what are we going to do about the existing buildings? And this is an interesting goal. As a society, we try to figure out at a policy level and owner by owner by owner, whether we're going to take an existing building and make it zero net energy, like HDW and DPR, whether we're going to take the existing building stock and take all of it, cut the energy use impact in half, we get to the same answer. So this is an interesting question right here. So whatever we're looking at, we're going to find the same themes. How do buildings do this? And Bryony gave us a look forward. First thing, we've got the efficiency that's embedded in the design of the building itself. How it's sited and oriented, its geometry, its openings. Then we have efficiency that's embedded in the equipment. So here's what the building is before someone comes into it. Then we have the efficiency in operations, and this is a combination of facility management and tenant occupant behavior. Then we can identify what the meter's going to see for the energy use of that building, and we want to offset that with renewables. So let's go to our next set of slides. These are...
Any Q&A right now? This is the time to have it on this first segment. All right?
Yes, John.
So you do need to be heard on tape. You have to use this microphone or whatever, okay?
So Beth, am I being heard?
Yeah,
I can't tell. Okay, thanks. If you are working with a building that's wasteful of its energy use, can you still have Z&E just by oversizing the PV or something like that? Or does Z&E actually connote that you're really efficient the way you use things?
That's a great question. The simple answer is yes. It can be a very wasteful building with a very large renewable offset, and technically it balances consumption and supply, because the zero net is the balance of consumption and supply. However, I would say that's not a high-performance building. This audio sounds different. Because you remember, one of the things we were talking about was healthier profits when we're looking at a high-performance building. So it's financially smarter to make it more efficient first and then offset with renewables. It doesn't necessarily, for existing building stock, as we're going after those, doesn't necessarily have to be done at the same time. It could be part of a multi-year plan. Say, first I'm going to do efficiency, then I'm going to add renewables. Or first I'm going to add renewables because there's great incentives and rebates right now and I'm ready to do that. And then here's my plan for bringing in efficiency. But when it's all said and done, it's both of those things are what make it sing. Yes?
Beth, this may be a little off the wall, but you had talked about trying to save electricity by self-generation. We have a lot of water coming into buildings. Water costs about 17,700 kilowatt hours per million gallons that pump from Northern California. Do you see that there's any opportunity to get water efficiency put into this this matrix of decisions on energy saving?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of talk about what the water energy nexus, because it turns out that pumping and treating water is one of the biggest uses of electricity in California. So when we save water, we save electricity. And when we're power, it takes a tremendous amount of water. So when we're saving electricity, we're saving. So when we're overall greenhouse gases and we're looking at many sources of it, then we're talking energy and water, agriculture, transportation, and still fairly early in the conversation, but the energy that's embodied in materials. In this part, when we're talking ZNE, we're only talking pretty much about the energy that the utility meter sees. So we're just talking about one slice of that overall pie. Okay.
All right, good. So if you were on computers 1 through 10, you can hit the down arrow button or that forward arrow button. So number 11 should be here. Number 2, you should be on Pro. Add 10 to your number. It's pretty easy, right? So
and there's
your number is, we want you to add 10 to that. You'll be 19. You'll be 20. We'll help you there. All right, good. And so you should start to see that come around the room. 12. We'll help you over here. So I think you've gotten started, and I'll help you with the rest. Okay?
that sounds fine. And the slides are a little bit out of order. So while the other ones are coming up, I'm going to start right over here. So. Really? However.
Okay, that's 10. How
That's.
did that happen?
So.
You have 2 10s, Beth.
No, that's not presentation. Somebody else's.
Yeah, these are not from mine.
That's what happened. I apologize.
That's okay.
We'll get that fixed.
That's okay.
All right.
Actually, I have 3 10s, 30 slides, right? So this is, I think, is interesting because it kind of just gives you a sense of how much difference it makes. We talked about the efficiency that can be embedded in the design of the building, the design and construction. So let's say that in general, 50 to 60% of the potential performance, energy performance of the building is embedded in design and construction. And then another big chunk is embedded in the operations, how well that facility is maintained and controlled and kept up. And then another big chunk is the way the occupants use it. So just to be aware, when we're talking about zero net energy buildings, part of what makes it tricky is that the design industry is used to dealing with this part and not knowing much about this part at all. And the building stock, we tend to focus on the maintenance and not pay that much attention to the occupants. So just to be aware that all of these pieces need to come together to get the most cost-effective options. And when we can't get the most cost-effective options, then we're still going to do what John suggested and say, okay, so where's our real world that we can get? And that's the number that we need to offset. So as we go into existing buildings, back over here on the other side of the room for swivel heads, this is just a quick version of, if you've got an existing building, what do you do? The first thing you do is you want to benchmark that building, find out how well it's relative to buildings of its class. And if you have a really good engineer, find out how well it's doing relative to its optimum performance. Then make sure that it's well maintained. Retro commissioning, almost every building out there needs to be retro commissioned. Basically, you take your car in for tune-ups every 5,000 miles, and you take your building in for tune-ups, never. So take your building in for tune-up every few years, and then do ongoing commissioning after that. There are very well-maintained facilities. There are almost always low-cost things that you can do right away, and you want to start planning for what we call deep retrofits, midterm and long-term capital expenditures to drive down the energy efficiency so that renewables can offset that at a smaller size and smaller price. And then keep an eye on it. You know, there's a reason we have gauges on cars, and we should be having gauges on every building as well. These are just some examples of some of the modeling tools that we use when we're looking at existing buildings. Here's where a building would start out, its energy use intensity, and you can see all of these different end uses. So I can't read from here what these are, but it's heating and cooling and pumps and fans and process loads and receptacles, inside lights and outside lights. Here's what this existing building was using to begin with. Here's what its potential was. It could cut its energy use in half by doing a variety of things. And the modeling process is a way of identifying what those things are and then ranking them so that two things. One, the most important things, cost-effective things can get done. And secondly, you know how to bundle them. If the glazing is improved, can the air conditioning system be smaller? If something's at the end of its useful life, that's the time to change it out, not just to the code minimum, but to something more efficient as a package. This is part of a natural ventilation study. This is part of identifying how much insulation is available on that site so that we can identify what's its potential for renewable energy. This is calibrating the model to the actual utility meters. And then once we have a good match here, then we can translate that into the end uses so that we know for that building, with its real occupants, its real weather, all the things that are going on in that building, not just what the meter sees, but which part of that is heating, cooling, lighting, fans, receptacle loads. And then we know what's important to look at, and we have a high confidence that when we start changing things, that those cost savings are going to be what was estimated.
That's just so I know they can't see that from far. At the bottom here, I see kitchen and IDF. I don't know what that is.
That would be a data server, and this particular building had a cafeteria.
Energy model walk-ins and a receptacle. There's third, heating fourth, cooling fifth, lighting, exterior lights, under counter lighting, fans, pumps, and DHW.
Mm-hmm. Domestic hot water.
Okay, good. So that's the levels you see there.
So it's just kind of a peek into kind of the cool stuff that modeling tools can do. This was an actual 4-story building that we did this analysis for. It started out with remember EUI? What does EUI stand for? Anyone? Not you, Dan, you already know. Energy use intensity, right. So the EUI of this building, it was a 2007 building, modern current standards, very well maintained, had active facility management, had an EUI of 85. With a little bit of maintenance that they couldn't see because they didn't have the right dashboards. They could bring that down to 72. There's other lighting efficiencies and efficiencies that they could bring in to bring this down into the 50s. They could do deep retrofits on equipment to bring this down to the low 50s. As the energy use potential, they wanted to know what would it take to make our building zero net energy. So these are low-cost things that could be identified just by the process, and then these are going to be longer-term capital improvements over time. Because it's a 4-story building, one of the things that you might have noticed on the set of buildings that Bryony had up to begin with, not every single one, but most of those were low-rise buildings, 1 and 2 stories. We can talk more about that. The higher story buildings, there's just not so much roof area. So unless there happens to be a lot of site available somewhere else, most zero net energy buildings that you're going to see coming right out the gate are low-rise buildings so that there's enough physical footprint for the PV panels to be located somewhere. And when we get to the clock, let me just say while I'm thinking about it, because I'll forget later, the LPL building that you identified in San Diego, the very tall tower that was white, that was a zero net energy, all of these buildings have stories. You know, they have geeks and numbers, but they have stories. And the story behind that one was that they were doing it with a fuel cell, which is a great idea. They did reasonable efficiency. They added a fuel cell. Fuel cells just by themselves are not necessarily renewable. Their plan was to use, instead of natural gas for that fuel cell, it's not necessarily even an energy saver, it might be a cost saver. Their plan was to use biogas instead of natural gas for that fuel cell. But right now, the state of the industry is such that it's really difficult to get a stable contract to continue to buy biogas over time. So it claims to be a Z&E building, but it's not a verified Z&E building yet. But it's good because it's set up itself as kind of like for planning, for forward planning, that when those contracts can become available, then it's set up to be able to go right into it. So it's kind of like the energy equivalent of dual plumbing your building even before you've got reclaimed water that you can use. I need to speed up a lot here. This is just a visual example of drawn from one of the buildings that was shown earlier. This is a 5-story building in Seattle. So how the heck could they put enough renewable energy on their roof to get to zero net? And what they did was they drove their energy intensity down, 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 because the guy who owned it just wanted to prove that it could be done. They won't tell us how much it cost. Most of that cost was frankly in materials because it was a living building, which meant that it was no materials on the red list, as well as zero net energy and zero net water, to your point, Dan. But it's a great story, it's a case study. This is the building as it is. This is how much roof it would have been needed if the building had been a code-complying building. So this just gives you a graphical idea that by making the efficiency better, then the size and the cost of the offset renewable energy also comes down, down, down. This is the HGW building. This was the first one in San Diego. We helped develop this one. This is an example of another one, and this is an office building. And there's a story there that you can ask if you want questions and answers. This is one of our new San Diego signature Z&E buildings that's in process. It's not verified because it hasn't had a year yet. But what's really cool about this is that it's a lab. So whereas a lot of these Z&E buildings have an EUI of 20 or under, this one had an EUI in the range of 50 or 60, because it's a lab, a high energy intensity building. And yet it was still able to get to Z&E. So it's becoming more and more possible across different occupancy types. The County of San Diego is having a strong goal for Z&E buildings. This is one of the ones that they have committed to at this point. So that's just kind of like a range of commercial buildings. And in the 3 minutes, we are, it's all right. I'm going to identify the Living Building Challenge, which flashed up there for Q&A, because I've got 3 minutes and I need to turn it over to Phil, who will then need to turn it over to Bill. So,
so good. Any questions on this set? This was the wonky side of this with some, certainly some modeling that went into this, some real detail.
Please use a microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. So questions about this set of 10? Anybody? You're okay if you don't? All good?
and you know what? I'm going to just stop here. This next set that I had was on residential, but the ideas are similar. And we've been talking about these ideas, and I want to make sure that Phil and Bill have a good, I want to hear what they have to say, too.
Okay, good. Give her a big hand.
Thank you very much.
All right, great. Thank you. So on your computers, I'll jump on yours over here, Bill, so we'll be fine. Hit escape, if you would. And let me have that pointer, or that pointer there. So the presentation that we're looking for down at the bottom says 13 May 15. So look for the one at the bottom at the, says 13 May 15. I see what happens, so we may have to do this a little bit different for some of you. Oh, it's coming up. Is that coming up for you over there, Mark, or are we having a computer issue? Yes, we're using 11 and 12 as well. You can't escape out of that? Well, I'll help you over there, okay? So 1, 2, number 3, you're still working on that one over there, Jeff? There it is, 4, and you're working on number 5 over here. Can you help him a little bit for number 5? So Bill Powers is one of our foremost architect advocates for decentralized power systems. If anybody knows how to put solar on the rooftop and disconnect from the grid, or at least be a net zero for your home or your commercial building, this guy's been doing, what do you call it, expert testimony to the utility at the Public Utilities Commission. I know his own house is disconnected from the grid. He knows how to do this in his bones. One of our smartest architect engineers. I don't know if you're an architect as well. You're not. All right. But one of the smartest guys we got in San Diego on how to do this, and it's thrilling to have him here again. Bill, you're up. Thank you.
How's that? Good? Okay. No, I'm not an architect. I don't design ZNE buildings. But how many people think ZNE buildings are awesome? Here. And how many people think these buildings that we saw earlier that Beth put up look excellent, look fantastic? Well, what I want to talk about is a bigger picture, the policy picture on ZNE buildings, because I am a big advocate for ZNE buildings. But ZNE buildings on a grand scale are revolutionary, at least in the context of power delivery in California. And there are a lot of incumbents that get threatened by ZNE buildings, and whose business is threatened by ZNE buildings on a massive scale. And so to start, I'd like to look at slide number 2. And I do spend a lot of time at the California Public Utilities Commission in hearings, in proceedings, and a lot of it has to do with exactly this question, is how do we supply electricity, energy in California? And what this map shows is a series of darkened areas, which are called load pockets, or local capacity areas. And what this means is that in each one of those pockets, you can see San Diego down at the lowest level, is a load pocket, the county by itself. And what this means is that under certain conditions, when that blue line, which is the transmission line or lines coming from Imperial County, is not available, hottest day of the year in 10 years, very high load, we're basically on our own. We've got to supply that electricity internally. And what's been happening, and I'm sure many of the people here are quite well informed, is there is a major energy debate going on even in our own county about building more gas turbines. Pio Pico, Carlsbad. At the same time, we say we want to maximize renewable energy. That's slide 3 right here. And so much of the debate that's going on at the state level centers around building most of our renewable energy to the right of those 2 lower splotches, which is the LA Basin and San Diego, putting the renewable energy outside of the load pocket, building the renewable energy here, building the renewable energy here, and then building transmission lines to get to it, but then building gas turbines here because we didn't put the solar there. So there's no solar to help us when we lose the transmission lines on that hot day. And so that's basically the debate that we're having at the state level. And so we get Pio Pico approved, even though most people would like to see a lot more of this, the parking lot solar, the rooftop solar. This slide here, 4, is in the United States in 2013, almost 7,000 megawatts of gas-fired generation were built. Go to the next slide. 4,000 of it was built in California. California by itself is carrying the gas turbine business in the country. We're building a lot of solar. That's what this yellow is. We're building a lot more gas. And in fact, we're building 2 separate power systems in California. We're building a completely conventional gas-fired transmission-based system. And on top of that, we're building a major renewable energy build-out. That's one of the reasons why our rates are going up so quickly, is that we are paying for, in my opinion, a somewhat of a redundant system. And I noticed Beth put some transmission lines up there in her presentation, and that is really the opposite of the ZNE model. But what's happening at a state policy level is we have the governor saying we want to go further than 33% renewables. We want to do more than that. And we haven't defined how we're going to do it yet. But the opposite of a ZNE build-out is this, the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. And these kind of pink splotches are where approximately 20,000 megawatts of mostly solar would go in the Colorado Desert, in the Mojave Desert, both in this area and out to the Arizona border. And this is one of those projects that's been around forever, for 4 or 5 years, from the time when solar panels were 4 or 5 times more expensive than they are now. But it has a lot of life, and this plan includes numerous alternates. The preferred alternate is alternate 13, but it involves building 13 500 kilovolt lines like the Sunrise Power Link from these solar development centers in remote areas. And so this is a serious challenge to the concept of the future, which is based on buildings, on urban solar development. I pointed out already where these load pockets are, and currently we just built a 300 megawatt gas plant right down by the border. We will decide within a few weeks whether to build a 500 or 600 megawatt gas plant at Encina. And this is going on as we are putting a lot more solar on rooftops in San Diego. In fact, I think percentage-wise we lead the state. Now, the policy context is everything on a policy basis, almost everything points in the other direction. We have a loading order, which is essentially, it is state law, which is any new demand is met with energy efficiency and demand response. Next tier is renewable energy without defining whether it's local or remote. Next tier is combined heat and power, gas-fired, but small hospital, university type, high efficiency gas-fired generation. And going over to this slide here, 12, and then we'll take a little pause, is one important context that we're living in, which makes a lot of this development somewhat hard to understand, is we have no peak load growth in California. This is 2006. This happens to be the Southern California Edison territory curve, but they're over 80% of the utility load in Southern California. SDG&E is similar, though we did have a little bump up in September of last year. But this shows our peak load pattern, which is flat to slight decline, and yet we have a major building boom. And part of it is inspired by, a lot of it is inspired by putting most of our renewable energy in remote areas of the desert part of Southern California. I don't know if this is a good time to take a little break.
It's the perfect time. Again, this is, we want to now, with these set of 12, stay focused your questions on this.
Microphone's next to you.
Oh, thank you. So questions to Ron?
Bill, where does wind power fit into this picture?
Wind power is now a pretty small part of the picture in Southern California. For example, this proposal is at least wind and solar split is about 90%, 10%. Part of it is the wind resource. The best parts of the wind resource have been relatively tapped out in Southern California. So wind is in it, but it's a small portion of it.
Other questions? Dan?
Well, the studies I've read show that the generation that we're bringing online is peaker plants to sort of be able to pick up the load when wind and solar is unavailable. My question is, are there any efforts to make them more efficient? Because peaker plants are generally less efficient than...
That is a perfect question, because I skipped the slide that talks about that, because I figured that was getting a little bit too much into the weeds. But we'll hit it now.
weeds kind of guy.
One of the big justifications, which is and sometimes it's hard not to be cynical spending so much time before the commission. But one of the big justifications for these fast start peakers is, well, a cloud comes over a solar array or the wind dies. And as a result, we need to kick on a peaker and it's got to pick that load up fast. And the reality, this lower curve here is investor-owned utility load, actual load, top curve. This is and then the curves below it are the 24-hour ahead prediction, which is this lower one, and then the 1 hour ahead prediction, which is almost dead on with what actually happens. And the reason I put this up here is that idea that you need to have a gas turbine that you're just firing and dropping and firing and dropping is without having a context that we can already forecast very accurately what our loads are going to be 24 hours ahead, an hour ahead. You don't need a fast start asset to handle that. You don't need to build that to deal with a load that we can predict 24 hours in advance. And the idea that in San Diego, we're probably approaching 60, 70,000 rooftops with solar spread over 1,000 square miles, no cloud or even no single cloud or bank of weather is going to have a dramatic impact on our output. It's too diffuse at this point. And so those at this point are red herrings as far as the gas turbine need.
Isn't Tesla working with that, making new batteries, lithium batteries that will actually store your solar so you don't have that problem?
That's also an excellent point. In the case of Encina, where the commission I gave testimony in this case, the commission's supposed to make a decision in a week or two whether to go with a gas plant or say, no gas plant, we're going to punt back to the loading order. And we want SDG to review bids to do that job with energy efficiency in a gas or demand response or rooftop or what we say we want to do as a state. And even Shell Energy, their testimony was about energy storage and the fact that if you're concerned about wind fluctuations or solar fluctuations and meeting rapid shifts in demand, you don't want a gas plant, you want a battery, and that it should be energy storage. And in fact, I'll talk about that a little bit later. On a policy level, that's where the state's going, that the energy storage batteries, at least at the coastal plants, displace gas turbines. But the politics are still heavily in favor of the gas plants.
Oh, well, in an individual home, for instance, I don't know how many batteries you'd have to have, but you use batteries on boats all the time that keep the boats going for 24 hours, no problem. 48 hours, no problem.
You have that at your home, don't you, Bill?
Yes.
So talk about your house specifically.
I actually kept my house out of the slides, just not to be, banging the drum too much. But
go ahead and brag.
I live over in University Heights, a couple miles from here, but we don't have a feed-in tariff in California so that we could cover our rooftops with solar and then feed the excess power back to the grid and get paid some reasonable amount for it. And so since we now have reasonably priced electric vehicles, what I did on my house is set it up with enough panels to cover the vehicle and the house, with the vehicle to be the load that is making the batteries pay for themselves. And so the way it's set up is, it's not a zero net energy house. We got double the amount of solar production we need to be zero net energy, but half of that at least is going to the vehicle. And the idea is the delta between the cost of a gallon of gasoline and going the same miles with a kilowatt hour of electricity is big. I mean, it's much more cost effective to do it with the electricity. Therefore, you can produce solar electricity on your roof at a certain rate. It's still cheaper than paying for gasoline to go the same distance. And so the experiment is, it actually helps me to have every square inch of my rooftop covered with solar, because where I'm making it work economically is to feed it to the car. And the court's still out as whether it really does break even with SDG&E rates today. And because I'm really just getting rolling on a true test of it. But that's the basic idea. And if it's not economic this year, it will be next year or the following year, depending on where the rates go. And so, but to me, that is the model for the future. It doesn't have to be every house can do that. One complication is the backup generator. I have a backup generator, excuse me. But I could back up 6 houses. I don't need to just back up my own house. I could back up a lot more houses. And the generator turned out to be a hassle. I mean, to permit, to put in, and everything else. So it's just an interesting experiment because you're starting to get a feel for how this thing would work as like a cul-de-sac microgrid. And it's pretty simple, but it's pretty effective.
That's a good opportunity to make actually a commercial for next month. Our event here with the Renewable Energy Society next month is called EV and its impact on the grid. One gentleman speaking, his name is Peter Norby. He's head of the County Planning Commission, has double the solar he needs on his house because he has two what they call I-beamers or whatever that car is.
I've been to his house. He has a nice house.
Yes. So he has a house with solar on the rooftop for the house, has enough solar on the rooftop to power his 2 electric vehicles, and basically he has a presentation that you're going to hear saying solar is a transportation fuel. He has zero costs, zero fuel costs. And when you hear the economics of this, he convinced me my next car is an electric car. So that's a commercial for next month. Okay. Chuck, real quick. Yeah, you got to talk into this.
Hi, I'm Chuck. I'm curious, where do we get our natural gas from here in Southern California?
It comes basically from 3 different places, 4: West Texas, San Juan Basin, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Central California, Central Valley.
We have to ship it all in, pipe it in here?
Most of it is piped in from out of state, yes.
All right, good. So let's go to our next 10. So if you're at slides 1 through 12, so we want you to count to 12 now. You know, count forward on 12 on your buttons. So number 1 should be number 13. Number 2 should be 14. Bill, you can get started on number 13 right now, and I'll make sure everything's good around the room. Okay?
So our policy on energy is excellent. For the last decade, state policy has been we're going to do it at a local level. We're going to, this slide that I have, or this graphic on page 13, is from a 2007 California Energy Commission report. It shows solar panels on the roof and batteries and everything that we aspire to for a self-contained microgrid type approach. The California Energy Efficiency Strategic Plan, I know Beth referenced that in her presentation, but part of it is also existing buildings. 25% of existing residential gets to near net zero by 2020, 50% of existing commercial net zero by 2030. That's a very big deal. I mean, that's retrofitting all of our existing structures. Southern California Edison is the utility to the north of us, and they have a pilot program going now, 300 megawatts to meet new load in the urbanized portions of their territory that is adjacent to San Onofre nuclear power plant. And so the stated objective of this pilot, 300 megawatts is a big pilot, but the stated objective is to eliminate the need for gas-fired generation to cover this same need that the energy efficiency, demand response, rooftop solar, energy storage will supplant permanently the gas-fired generation. Beth also used this graphic, it's a nice graphic showing commercial building Z&E conversion, where 50% of the building stock reaches Z&E by 2030. I use this as the basis in a project I did for the San Francisco Bay Area of looking at, well, what if we keep going? In 2030, we're at 50%. What if we just keep going at a linear rate and hit 75% or 80% of the buildings? And because of the fact that we've already got 25 to 30% of our electricity supply is renewable, that at about 2035, 2036, we hit 100% green, just following that track on ZNE buildings and accepting the existing remote renewables that we have. And so we have excellent state policy. The politics and the political power is really behind the conventional approach, which is transmission lines, gas plants, and that's one of the reasons that we're building two independent power generation systems, a conventional one that is gas-fired and another that is renewable energy driven. However, some recent legislation like AB 327, that was supposed to put the silver spike into net metered solar for rooftops. But because the industry and the supporters were strong enough, we tripled their net metering cap with that legislation. And we're now building gangbusters on rooftop solar. That wasn't the bill author's intent. It just was the way the politics worked out. Right now, and this is just the last 6 months, rooftop solar installation rates 30 to 35 megawatts a month in Southern California Edison territory. It's 10 megawatts a month in SDG&E territory. And the interesting thing to me is over here, for example, on slide 14, target 25% of existing residential, approximately net zero by 2020. This rate of solar installation is about equivalent to about 2.5% of our peak load per year. If you go out a decade, that's 25% of the peak load per decade. It actually tracks, it's not quite the same number, but almost by accident, we're installing rooftop solar at a rate that is at least roughly consistent with that strategic plan. If you listen to the radio or the ads by solar companies in San Diego, they'll say, you need to move now on your solar project because the law is going to change in a year, things are changing, move now. This law that was passed, it really bumped up all of these rooftop solar installations, which are a significant part of a zero net energy building. One thing that isn't well known about this law is it also codifies the idea that this industry is supposed to grow sustainably, meaning when net metering ends, the law states this customer-sited renewable distributed generation continues to grow sustainably, meaning it doesn't just drop at 2017 or whenever we hit that target. And that's important to both know and to advocate for, because there will be a lot of pushback to try and ratchet down what is happening. Because if it continues at this rate, the zero net energy concept will, just by pure momentum, start to dominate the electricity supply system, which I think would be a great outcome. But there are many battles yet to be fought on that. The only other major point I want to make is about economics. And the main pushback from the utility side is that, well, obviously putting solar panels on an individual building can't possibly be as cost effective as putting it in a 100 megawatt array in the desert. And that's true within the fence line of the array in the desert or around the building. But this is a table I just put together, and it's approximate, but cost of utility scale desert solar versus commercial rooftop urban solar. Cost benefit deficit, put it in terms of dollars per kilowatt hour, maybe 1.5 cents. Thank you. 2 or 3 cents of difference maybe, advantage desert solar. But if you have to build a transmission line to get there, like the Sunrise Power Link, it costs $2 billion, and your capacity factor is 25%, meaning 75% of the time you're generating nothing, then just on a dollar per, this would be the equivalent of 9 cents a kilowatt hour to get it from Imperial County to San Diego. If you didn't put the solar in San Diego, so that when you lose a transmission line, you have no power from that resource, and you have to build enough backup generation to cover what you would have gotten from the solar that was on ZNE buildings in San Diego, you add another 5 cents a kilowatt hour to the cost of the solar in the desert, to the point that if you looked at it in the big picture, you would not concentrate on putting solar out in the desert because of all of the ancillary expenses that go with it. So we have this battle going on, but we also have the governor doing some good things. This January, he, at least in the State of the Union address, I think this is in his executive order as well, doubling the efficiency of 50% of the state-owned building stock, and now presumably of the entire building stock in the state. And that's a huge step toward zero net energy on a broad scale. This is just a summary of major legislation on energy storage, battery storage, that is requiring the utilities to put in substantial amounts of battery storage. And really, for these battles over individual gas-fired plants, the preferred resource that is the #1 candidate to displace it is battery storage and energy storage. And entities like Electric Power Research Institute are coming out with reports saying that the battery storage is less costly than gas turbines for the same application, which is just building the momentum behind, if we put in new large utility scale systems, that they would be batteries and not gas-fired generation. And the final part of this is just all the games that are being played at the state level to try and undercut these elements that form the concepts of zero net energy buildings, discounting the value of energy efficiency, discounting the value of demand response. But the bigger context, and I think many of you are probably quite aware of this, there is a once-in-a-generation controversy going on at the commission, at the state level, the California Public Utilities Commission, that basically controls which way we go on energy. And their president left recently. There are numerous investigations, and what it has to do with is a far too cozy relationship between the appointed commissioners and staff, the commission, and the regulated utilities. That's going to shift this year. It's too big a scandal for business as usual. And so it opens up more space for something like the zero net energy concept, which we've had for a decade, but haven't really accelerated to the degree that we should based on its status in the firmament of policy at the commission. There's going to be a shift this year at the commission, and it is going to become more, the playing field is going to level out more than it has in a long time. So it's an excellent opportunity to push on the zero net energy concept on a lot of reasons, or for a lot of reasons, economics for one, but also its time has come. And the stars are lining up to make it happen faster than I thought it would, especially with what's happening at the commission. So those are really, that's my presentation. Thank you.
The last three up here, if you want to finish them out.
Oh, last three is here in San Diego and all over the state, really. One alternative to the utility providing supply is community choice aggregation. I'm sure most people here are at least somewhat familiar with that concept.
Assume you're not.
Okay. State law 12, 13 years ago, in the wake of the energy crisis, allowed political jurisdictions, cities, counties in the state to take over the electricity supply function. That it was latent for a while, but then Marin County did it in 2010. Sonoma did it, I think, starting in 2013. Several entities, especially the real focal point has been Northern California until recently. City of Lancaster, Southern California, I think they just launched. And we have a study underway in the city of San Diego as that being potentially an alternative the city could take advantage of, take over the electricity supply function. SDG&E would retain control of distribution and transmission. And one reason for putting it in this presentation is it provides more local control. I mean, the city level is determining what the supply package will be, and that opens up an opportunity to focus on zero net energy buildings, local development of clean energy. And it does appear that this concept has rising momentum around the state, and it's much more likely in 2015 for me to say it is a real possibility in San Diego, which I wouldn't have said in 2010. There's so much momentum behind it in the state. And in part, I'm sure many of you are aware that our rates are going up fast. We are getting hit with major rate increases, shifting of rates. The question is, other than the issue of renewable energy, which the zero net energy concept addresses, why in an era when we have no increase in load are our rates increasing so fast to pay for things like transmission and gas plants? It's a good question. And this is a tool that might allow us to concentrate, would allow us to concentrate more on developing the renewable potential in the city of San Diego.
What is the answer to that question you just posed? That is, why are the rates going up?
Well, the question is, for example, I pointed out the Pio Pico gas plant, Sunrise Powerlink transmission line as examples. We have many major infrastructure projects that are in the pipeline or have been built, and those costs are now in our rates. And the reason for mentioning the Utility Commission and for mentioning that we're building two parallel systems, I mean, we could shut down all the solar panels in the state today, and we wouldn't miss a beat, because we built so many gas. We can shut down the nukes. We shut down San Onofre, because the commission has been so not passive, but accepting of very conservative growth projections, and the utilities say we need gas plants, and they go, okay, you get the gas plant. We need another gas plant.
What's the problem then with supporting the grid that we hear about? In other words, what's all that about?
The grid does need support, no question about it. It's a 24/7 grid, but it's the wordplay. I mean, and I can say this because I've been working as an expert witness there for 10 years. It's a kabuki theater where, yes, a gas plant can handle that swing load, but we have many resources available to us that can handle, and we do it every day. We handle every day these load changes, including what is now probably north of 10,000 megawatts of solar and wind. And it's here, and we're handling it. And we are handling it with our existing resources. And so the game that we play at the commission is, why can't we use, this is me. We have a 50-year-old gas plant at Encina, 1,000 megawatts of gas-fired generation, absolutely reliable. Why not hang on to that for a couple more years if we need it until batteries supplant it, instead of building a new gas plant there at great cost that will be around for 50 years. And on top of that, we build the batteries anyway, later. It makes no sense from a strategic standpoint if it was your money. But at the commission, they don't treat it like it's your money. They treat it like the ratepayers are an endless sink for projects that are relatively easy to approve. And so what is one comment that you could make to a member of the public? Say, well, without the gas plant, how are we going to fill in for the wind and the solar? On its surface, if you're a civilian and you don't know much about it, it sounds reasonable. And that's how much of this game is played. Throw out these ideas that seem conceptually reasonable, when in fact there are 8 different ways to solve the problem, 7 of which already exist, and get the plan approved. That's how the game works.
Other questions? Sir, okay. Go ahead, Ryan.
I have 2 questions. The first is, are you optimistic? And the second is, what are the hurdles that we have to pass to be able to get where we want to be? So what are the things that we can do apart from putting rooftop, building our own or converting our own homes to zero net energy? What are things that we as people can do if we're not in your shoes?
To answer the first question, especially given I'm a naturally optimistic person, I am optimistic. And I see it more as a timescale thing, is that this zero net energy concept is inevitable. The only question is, are we going to build $50 billion worth of infrastructure that we don't need while we do it? And are we going to potentially convert large portions of what are now remote areas into industrial areas when we don't have to do that? And so to me, it's just potentially wasting money that is a distraction will we get to the end point that we're going to go to anyway? And number two, I mean, if you want to talk about really having an impact on the short term, is all of this is decided at the California Public Utilities Commission. I mean, they have the power of God over what direction we go in. They are in a state of major flux at this moment due to scandals that have evolved out of the San Onofre settlement and the San Bruno pipeline explosion. And so who is the Speaker of the Assembly of California? Toni Atkins. This is her district. Toni Atkins wields great power in Ben Wesso, senator right down the road. He's the chair of the Senate Energy and Utilities Commission. Oversees the commission is to just let them know that we want transparency. You get transparency at the commission, we get to a zero net energy future much faster than now. What the problem is, and this happens with many commissions that regulate select industries, they frequently become captive of those industries. And that's where the commission has been. But that may not where it will be in 6 months or a year due to this. And so the politics of this is so overwhelmingly significant. It's just a great time if you know Toni Atkins or Ben Wesso or any of these electeds, they are deciding this week, next month, in the next 3 months on reform legislation, more transparency. Just picking up the phone and saying, I want a more transparent PUC will accelerate this process.
I find myself confused about a couple issues that I'm hoping you can sort out. One is there's a time when the net metering is going to expire. It says over here, phase out by 2017. And over here it talks about the quantity of solar, rooftop solar that can be installed, likely to fill out by mid-2016. And yet we're talking about trying to get these ZNEs with this continual growth of solar, specifically residential. So help me understand, help me navigate where we're going and where we're going, how we get past the limitation on the number, where we go after net metering's out, et cetera.
And Peter, just so I don't co-opt too much time, how much?
We're going to do one more question after this, and then we're going to move
Okay.
on to the film, okay?
That's an excellent observation, John, in that, so we've had an accelerated deployment of solar because the cap has been lifted to a higher level, and so things are booming for the time being. But within a year or year and a half, we're going to hit the cap. And that's where this issue is being debated right now, which is in the law that established or lifted this cap so high, it put in, so what do we do next? What do we do when we hit that cap? Well, when we hit that cap, the utilities have to offer standard contracts to people that want to put in solar. Qualitatively, those contracts are supposed to be sufficiently lucrative that the local solar, rooftop solar continues to grow sustainably. Hasn't been defined yet. That's what's being hashed out now. If the commission has determined that the avoided cost of putting in rooftop solar is about 15 cents a kilowatt hour. If they stay with 15 cents a kilowatt hour, sky's the limit. But there's going to be a lot of pushback between now and when they establish what those contract prices are. But if it's 15 cents, this will happen and everyone can go home happy that ZNE future will be bright. I have a feeling they will establish contract prices that are good.
So feed-in tariffs, so is that the same?
Essentially, they're setting a price that you will be paid for that electricity. So it's in effect, that's what it would be. Though I don't think they would necessarily allow you to generate more than a 100% level. I'm not sure about that.
That was my next question.
Yes, I'm not sure that will be part of it.
One more with Eric on here.
Hi, you had mentioned one of the comments you were making spurred some thought. You had said something about, the unfortunate specter of building $50 billion in, central distribution and transmission infrastructure unnecessarily. Was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about maybe what goes into that, what you project that number on. Also, if you could give an estimate, let's say miracle of miracles, like right now, today, all of a sudden the entire built environment in the San Diego region was net zero. What amount of stranded costs would we be looking at right now in existing central generation and distribution infrastructure?
I'll try and answer that. The first one is pretty easy. The slide's not up, but in the plan that the state has floated for putting 20,000 megawatts into the desert, they are explicit that this will include either 13 or 14 500 kV transmission lines, new lines. And our experience locally is with the Sunrise PowerLink transmission line that was energized about 2 years ago. And the final price on that was $1.9 billion, so approximately $2 billion. And so the basis for an estimate of transmission, just the highest voltage transmission cost, would be 2 billion times 13 or 14, so somewhere around 25, 30 billion. And then that is amortized at 5 times that over many years. The issue of the built environment, say that we shift gears, we don't do any of that activity, and we just build in San Diego to achieve the same effect. That if we don't build that, then there's no stranded cost because we didn't build it. But where I would see stranded costs, not so much stranded is unnecessary. If you're going to put 5,000 megawatts of Kyocera panels in a remote part of Imperial County, you could just as easily put that 5,000 megawatts of Kyocera panels on rooftops and parking lots in San Diego. In their space, there is available square footage to do that. You're not stranding that transmission line, but you didn't need to build it if you went that way. So you're eliminating that cost. The same is on the gas turbines. If we're putting the solar in San Diego and we accept that the solar is going to be available at some level in the afternoon, 60% of its capacity rating, whatever it is, then we don't need to build duplicate supplies to cover that 60%. It's going to be there. And so I consider all these gas turbine projects in the pipeline as essentially, they're not stranded because they will be used, but it's a fork in the road. There's a fork in the road and you're choosing this fork. And if you didn't choose that fork, you wouldn't have to put the money into that fork. And you just go forward with this leaner, cleaner, less costly route.
Outstanding. Would you give him a big hand?
Thank you.
And that was almost like a perfect question, and I want to now pitch an event that we're going to have in 2 weeks, because all of you should come to that, given what we just heard. At our Green Scene meeting that we do every month, we're going to have Rob Anderson. Rob Anderson is the lead system planner for SE&E. His job is to look out 5, 10, and 20 years and figure out what, as a utility, they're going to build to keep the lights on 24/7 at the cheapest possible price. And they're dealing with all of these issues, which has to do with, we're putting rooftop solar, right? So they're not getting any credit for that rooftop solar. We're plugging in our cars now, which is causing new load on the grid at night that was never there before. It's like a new house that you're adding to that circuit when you plug it in at night. There's renewable portfolios. As a utility. I just turned it on, sorry. So that's going to be on May 27th. Everybody in here ought to be here for that evening. Okay, hit escape on your button. I want you to go to a website that has SDRES, and I think the bottom says, help me out here, it says SDRES and Genie at the bottom on that PowerPoint. Look at the bottom of your slideshow. Let's see if I can help you out here.
Oh, here.
It is there. It says SDRES, that one.
Okay.
All right. And I'm going to go to slideshow from current slide, and it should start to show up. You'll see this
Thank you.
coming up around the room. And as it comes up around the room, if you'll start with 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, this is a very rich and deep presentation. Phil Bona here works with BNIM. I think it's global
Just recently.
Okay, went global as an architectural firm, works at the large commercial sector on buildings to, obviously, to make them as efficient as possible and net zero if possible. I've known Phil for probably a decade now. He's one of the advisors here for the Sim Center, works as a past chair of the Urban Design Committee, which I kind of call the old farts of the AIA. These are the guys that have been doing architecture in San Diego forever. Forever. They're the ones that the smart, old, gray-haired guys of San Diego that have built San Diego. So Phil was the chair of that committee. It's great to have you here, Phil. So I don't know if you're going to, he's got a slide deck that's probably way too long for the rest of the evening. So you tell me what's appropriate, and you give as much as you want, okay?
Okay. Well,
great to have you here. Thank you.
And thank you for having me, everybody. I've got, my notes didn't print out, so I'm going to have to use the laptop to reference notes. So I'm going to stand here if I may, and that's all good. I'll just say yes, and I'm going to go around the room, and I'm going to probably talk a little fast so that I can get through the slides. I have some case studies which you might find interesting. So we're, BNIM as an architecture and planning firm also has landscape architecture in-house. We are in San Diego, but the headquarters is in Kansas City, Missouri, and a lot has gone on back there from an energy point of view. Talk to you today about the power of net zero and the possibilities. We're going to show you some possibilities so that you have an idea of what can be done, what perhaps should be done more readily here in San Diego. BNIM is about 112 people at the moment, and we've had the good fortune of doing related buildings since the term was coined. Our kind of guru is Bob Berkebile, and he is an architect and was instrumental back in the early 90s in the establishment of not only the AIA Committee on the Environment, he started that nationally, and then with Rick Federici, and was on the board, first board of the Green Building Council. So we go back all the way to the beginning of green and sustainability, and we've been recognized for that, and we're very happy to be that. So we are in the business of that we can to design and build net zero buildings. That's our charge. Have our clients, because they don't have the vision yet. They don't see the bottom line yet. So we're trying to work with the triple bottom line and make a difference. Okay. This with the core values here talks about, we deliver beautiful integrated living environments that inspire change and enhance the human condition. We seek to increase the vitality of people, planet, and prosperity equally. Moving on around to the, we have received 9 AIA Committee on the Environment Top 10 Green Awards. So we've got 9, the awards program has been around for about a decade, and we've pretty much gotten one a year, so that's been a very important recognition for those efforts. These are a variety of buildings around, mostly these are on that side are in the Midwest, and are for such clients as the Internal Revenue Service and I can't read that up there. Anyway, they're large, generally public buildings. In those areas, the municipalities have agreed to understand the benefits of LEED in particular, and the targets for net zero and the philosophies behind that. Moving on to generous pragmatism. So this is a building that we just completed up in Sorrento Valley for our friends at Qualcomm. And this building is the largest naturally ventilated office building in the West Coast. It's almost 400,000 square feet, naturally ventilated. So you can see the windows are open on the ground floor. They're all actually open on the entire building at this moment. The slide was taken.
but we do have, thank you. We do have solar shading devices in here and drought-tolerant plantscaping down below, and with the natural ventilation. And so this, we used just regular glass. We didn't use low-E glass. We didn't use highfalutin materials. We used standard materials, and we put them together in a way that achieved the same results. So this building, which actually is here as well, so the south elevation has the solar shading devices. The north elevation does not. And then the east and west elevations are fairly opaque. So there's no windows, very little windows on the east and west elevations in that case. We built it for just under $300 a square foot, 400,000 square feet. Moving on to, let's see, what a building can do that matters as much as what it looks like. So this is the Omega Center. This was, in fact, the first awarded living building under the Living Building Challenge, and it is also LEED Platinum. It has all the systems integrated. I mean, what we strive to do is integrate everything together so that all of the systems are maximized. It is a high-performance integrated design. So we stretch the box on every aspect of it. We get the best quality out of every system that's in here. This is actually a water treatment plant for a campus, for a college campus. And it's the only water treatment plant that has, I guess those slides haven't come yet, but we'll show you more of that in a minute. But it has a ballet studio inside of it as a water treatment plant. So it's about how you leverage people, place, planet, prosperity, all of those things. Our approach, our design strategy is a layered approach. We really dissect the process of making sure a building fits in its setting, that that building is the best that it can be for its neighborhood, that it has beauty, it has functionality, and it maximizes all of the systems. Oh my.
Double wire.
I'm not loud enough. Okay, so that's what that is. And we use the philosophy, no one knows as much as everyone. So we are collaborative. So when we meet with a client, we bring the consultants in. There's a thing called design build these days that is a forced marriage between the architectural engineering industry and the construction industry. It has it's very much positives potential, and it can have its struggles. But we bring the whole team together before we start designing. Wherever we can, we have the contractors and the subcontractors and the plumbers and the electricians, because nobody knows as much as everybody. So why not start there? And it makes a better building. So these are some things about zero energy usage that we've written. We actually have an interesting, I was quite enamored when I joined the firm to find out that every major building that we design, we write a book about. So there's about 20 books that are all about very significant energy efficient, high performance buildings that are available, and they focus on the case study of each of those buildings. This talks about heating, cooling, lighting, tenant reduction. It's kind of, I think Beth had a slide similar to this, and it's about whittling it down until you get to the place where you're at that net zero energy point. Okay? We do not seek to imitate, that's what that is, nature, but rather find the principles she uses. That's a Bucky Fuller, huh? In honor of Peter. So there's more to come. If you have questions, we can start now.
Just a second, Eric. I can talk loud. I was wondering if you could tell me. Oh, okay. I was curious a little bit about how you would compare and contrast LEED on a project with the Living Building Challenge.
It's Living Building Challenge is an extension of LEED. It's the next step after platinum somehow. And the politics of those recognized systems like LEED and Green Bill, what's it? What are the others? Green Globe, thank you. And you know, they all kind of are competing for a market share together. They have different values. Where people will listen and they are utilized, it's all a good thing. I mean, it gets the same results. LEED has, through the U.S. Green Building Council, done very well in being very organized, and they've infiltrated very early into the construction industry. The smartest thing they did in the middle of the 2000s time frame, they went after real estate agents. They went after contractors. And there was a point in time where there were more non-architects who were LEED certified than there were architects who were designing buildings to be LEED certified. So they were raising the consciousness of it. But in the realm of those metrics, that from the U.S. Green Building Council, the politics and the cost can be prohibitive. It's $30,000 pretty much to start. And that's, you know, you could put a bunch of PV on your roof for $30,000. So why do I want to get a plaque on my wall? And a lot of people think that way. And a lot of other people, from a corporate point of view, are very appreciative of they spent all that money, they have a beautiful building, it's high performance and efficient. I want to have my plaque on the wall so people know I did that. And that's, you know, it's just part of the communication chain. Living Building Challenge is a different group. It's not U.S. Green Building Council. They wanted to take it to that next step. It's like Bill's slide that talked about, you know, going past 2030. What's that going to be like? So what it wants to be like, as far as the Living Building Challenge is concerned, is buildings that are net positive. So they produce more power, more clean water than they use. And they're able to pass it on to the neighborhood. I mean, that's where microgrids and neighborhood-based water treatment facilities can come into play. And sharing bioswales and cleaning our stormwater before it ever goes in the bay. Those are all very valuable, important things. Okay?
Okay, good. And just to acknowledge, we do have the architect in town who manages all of that. I don't say manages, but at least coordinates the architectural community. Bastian Bauma is the executive director of the AIA here in San Diego. So if you want to get it from the best of the best, sitting over here, and again, an architect in his own right from Chicago that came to San Diego a couple of years ago and leads that AIA organization. So it's great to have you here. Thank you again. So it looks like most of you have started to move, so we want to see 13 through 24 all the way around the room. I think you guys know how to do this, so go right ahead, Phil.
Okay. High performance integrated design is what we do, and this slide in here, it's very hard to read. But it's really about the components that make up integrated design, and I can't even read it.
I'll even read it for them.
Would you mind?
There you go.
Thank you.
Human well-being, energy to the right, food, going down to local economy, natural habitats and ecology, operations, continuous improvements, waste, transportation, architecture, construction, and water. So an integrated full system, right?
So again, the approach is to really think of all of those things when I'm going to design a building. When I'm going to think about the roof, I'm going to think about all of those things. When I'm going to design the doors and which way the building's orientated and where the windows are and where the front is. You know, they called it feng shui in a day. It's really about energy feng shui. It's really about appropriate design so that the elements, the natural environment around us supports the buildings that we live and work and play in. And we can enjoy the front yards and the backyards in those ways. This is an approach where, so life cycle analysis is a piece of this. So as we've gone on, what we've learned over the years is people don't trust that this stuff really works. And so they want the numbers. So what we started doing is putting sensors in all of our buildings. We started putting dashboards in all of our buildings. And now when we're done, the building, like a car, can tell us how many miles per gallon and how far we went and how much water we used and how much water we flushed down the toilet. And we have the ability to know those things. So we can test them. And as we've, interestingly, on most of our buildings, as time has gone on, we have learned, as what they call it, post-construction evaluation. So we generally don't get paid for that part because we've designed it, we've built it, it's done. They don't want to pay us any more money, but they're really happy to have us come and look at their building to help them be assured that they're on the right track. So we come back, we have a lessons learned, we come back a year later and 2 years later, and that's where all of those that data gets published in the books that we write about the buildings. So what we learned on this slide here is that on the left is the current proposal. So the top blue is the glazing blast film, which allows light to be diffused. Then we have chilled water piping, and then chillers and air handlers and hot water piping and boilers. So we still have pretty much all those things in the other column, but we've redistributed the usefulness of those things. And the top becomes enhanced glazing with blast protection. And then chilled beams come into play. And then chilled water piping and then chillers are down. They're more efficient. And so, for example, the air handlers that you put on the roof of a building, those big, huge things that often kind of spoil the look of the roof, are very costly. They're very costly to operate. And what we want is not to use them. We want to turn them off. And so we have naturally ventilated buildings, and we have chilled beams, and we use hot and cold water from other passive sources if we can. And so the building may cost the same. And I'll tell you, like I mentioned for the building in Sereno Valley, under $300 a square foot, there's not a lot getting built today for under $300 a square foot. So you can build it. It can be a good-looking building. It can be highly functional and high performance, and it won't cost you a dime more than if you did a bad job. That's kind of cool. So again, as we put all those sensors in the buildings, they give us metrics. And so net zero by the numbers is what the next series of slides are. So this Department of Natural Resources in Missouri, what we found out there was that once the building was completed and they all moved in, after a year they had 9% reduced absenteeism. And as they agreed to pay for the LEED Platinum certification, they also have now enjoyed a 60% energy savings over what they used to pay. And that's all good. This one is the Bannister Federal Complex Finance Office in Atrium, 80% reduction in back orders. New orders are filled 60% faster. So people are motivated. It's all natural daylighting. It's all full of windows. So they don't have to turn the lights on. They can work in natural light. And there's plenty of studies, and especially in schools, that have been done to show how humans perform better when they are in contact with natural sunlight. And so we tried it out, and it turned out to be true. On the Heller International headquarters, 45% energy savings, net zero water. Depends on how you use water. Water elements on a project, on a site, we think of them as fountains. Oh, we need to turn that fountain off because it's wasting water. Well, that's a bad attitude because we need water, and we need water around our buildings. It humidifies, it cools the building, it cools the heat island effect. And so water elements can be very positive. The thing about it is, this wants to be rainwater that stays. This doesn't want to come from your domestic water. We want to, from our perspective, the only thing that domestic water should be used for is drinking. The only thing. No toilets, no sinks, no washing, no showers, no laundry, drinking. Secondary water that has been filtered, and we'll get some slides in a little bit to talk about some of the techniques there. We can have potable water that is as good and clean and tasteful as the water that comes out of our normal pipes today by recycling them and reclaiming that water. And that's part of what's happening here, and that's why they got the net zero water there. This is the Iowa Utilities Board Office of Consumer Advocacy, 75% less energy usage, and that's below the ASHRAE 90.1 2007 version. And again, they're fairly attractive, at least, you know, I'm patting ourselves on the back, but they're pretty clean looking buildings. They're simple. Generally, we don't put ceilings. We don't put suspended ceilings in our buildings. We let the guts show. We might put a cloud, we call them clouds. We put little mini covers that kind of create a more of a comfort zone, more of a people scale place. It's more about that than it is about simply, I don't want to see, you know, all this infrastructure that's up there. So we don't spend the money on it. We don't put flooring down. We use the concrete. Most of our buildings are concrete. We use the latent heat effect of concrete. It's all passive solar, and the slabs are just they're polished. They're just cleaned. And so we don't spend money on vinyl or mastic that has asbestos and things like that in it. We keep that out. So clients give us visionary goals. And in this case, the energy utilization index or intensity, thank you, was 28.0. And that was what they gave us, okay? And that's for this building, the same building here. And they asked for 60% reduction, and we gave them 75. I mean, you know, it works out. And they were, we hadn't even talked about LEED. They didn't want us to submit for LEED when we started. But by the time we got all these systems to work that efficiently, they thought it was a slam dunk, so they went ahead and paid for it. This is a building, these three slides here is a nursing school, University of, hold on, Texas Health School. And you'll notice that all of these buildings, and you'll see some more, they're narrow. The Qualcomm building was 75 feet. Most of the buildings are between 55 and 70 feet or so. And that's because that's cross ventilation. You open up the windows on one side, and you open up the windows on the other side, and you got air going through. If you had 150 feet at some of these huge behemoth square buildings, natural ventilation doesn't work because the air just dies inboard of the building. So again, so this is a 55-foot wide building. And so what we talk about is we have 5 facades. There's the 4 sides of the building and the roof. Now, people usually ignore the roof, historically, traditionally, because everybody sticks the big air handling units on the roof and we don't want to see them. So we forget about it. But we're saying no. So we do the best we can to not put air handling units on the roof. We try to put them in the building envelope. And then the roof is available for gardens and parks and PV. All those things are possible once you get the air handlers off the roof. So we really consider a building that it has 5 elevations. But this ultimately had 93% reduction in water, which is great because 42,000 gallons of reclaimed water is used each month for toilet flushing and irrigation. So we can say the same things here. We can do that here. We can save water like we can save energy. Okay, so that's those slides. There's more to come. Any questions on these?
John? We're going to have to go fairly quickly. I'm going to acknowledge we're at time right now. We normally said we're done. If you have to go, please go quietly. Maybe another 15 minutes.
You can cut me off, and we're going to go into case studies, and I can just stop at a case study.
All right. In the last illustration, you talked about reclaimed water in that building. Do you actually process that on site, adjacent to the site? How do you do that?
In a variety of means and methods. Once you'll see the slides coming up for the Omega Center here will be a good tell for that. So
you can say if you want to save that answer.
May I save that answer?
Yep. Save that answer.
I will answer it. Any other questions?
We're good? Kind of make them focused questions, all right?
What was the water use actually on the building that you served 93%? How much was the intake of water?
I don't have that statistic, but again, if we use waterless urinals, if we use 1.3 gallon per flush toilets, if we and I don't think they double pipe that building, but if you use the low flow devices on the sinks, I mean, really, in an office building, that's all you really have. I mean, you may have a break room sink, you may have an ice maker, but generally you're going to have restrooms and those kinds of things. So 42,000 gallons for toilets and all that. I mean, the toilets is the biggest probably user of all of that.
I know we had a gentleman from Vienna, Austria last year who did a presentation at the local C3 council, and one of the things that you said that I just was amazed about that city. It's considered one of the most livable cities in the world 4 years in a row, or 4 of the last 10 years, and every commercial building there has some kind of plaque or statement that says, here's the energy and water use of that building when you go in the building. Yeah. So it's just, everybody is aware of the utility and how much energy and water is used in that building, just like they're doing here with BNIM. Why aren't we doing that with every single building here in San Diego and in California? Just a question. You gotta put it into the code and require it. So let's move on to the next. So we should be 27 up to number 1. Is that correct? And then we'll keep moving around.
Yeah, it looks pretty.
We'll make sure.
Okay, so again, daylighting strategies are a little bit more inventive today, and they have something that they call solar tubes. Anybody not heard of a solar tube? They're made in Vista. They're made in Vista. There you go. But you can take this. What it is it's highly polished aluminum, and then it's a little dome. It's actually right here. And it has a shaft to it, like you took a dome, you took a garbage can, you lined it with really shiny reflective material, and interestingly enough, it illuminates this whole room most of the day because the sun moves around the sky, and so you've got natural daylight coming in this, what could be a skylight, looks like or a window, sky window, or some kind of a thing. And they actually have it so that you can have a light inside of it as well, so that at nighttime it can continue to light the room in the same way, and it still feels like daylight, especially if you use LED. It has the capacity now. How many know how they painted the inside of the tombs in the pyramids? What's the key word? Mirrors. So you can take that light and you can reflect it, and you can go now horizontal 10, 20 feet, and then go down again, and you can still get the benefit, because frankly, my brother put one in his house, in his entry foyer, and it's too bright. It's really too bright. It's like a hospital surgical ward. So you can benefit from angling them and bringing them into other rooms. We're working on a building now that is built up against a hill, and it's 4 stories built up against the hill, and those bottom 2 floors don't have any windows, don't have any lights. So we're going to bring these solar tubes, a whole series of solar tubes, and we're going to put at least one in every room, so that every room will have natural daylighting. And then we're going to have a solar chimney that's going to go up the center of the building and draw natural ventilating air from parts of the building through all those rooms. So the goal is that every room has natural daylighting, every room has natural ventilation. Okay? So that's an example of all that. Sometimes you don't want that light, so you put the solar shading devices, and it filters the light from coming in so brightly as the sun tracks across the sky. There's actually a formula that some people have done movable shading devices that track the sun, and that's wonderful, but they're motorized and they're expensive, and motors can cause maintenance. We've figured out for each of the latitudes that we build buildings in what an appropriate distribution of those. Basically, they're about 8 inches wide, 8 inches to a foot wide. They're curved a little bit, and they're at different angles as they go up, because we want the sun to come and hit those and then bounce up and hit the ceiling so that now we're bringing that natural daylight in, but we don't want it to hit your eyes. So we've calculated a way of bringing it into the building and funneling it up to the ceiling. And then beyond that, we're kind of keeping it out. They're in your view, but they're not causing this, allowing the sunlight to come in. And then again, in the passive strategies point of view, building orientation is key. 90% of our buildings, and this is, this is the rule of the day. Your buildings should be oriented east-west. So the south side of the building is the long side of the building in every case, because as the sun traverses the sky and your horizontal shading devices are covering the windows in that case, you have much better ability to manage the light and the solar heat gain into the building on the south side. But when that west sun, when that sunset, that beautiful sunset sun comes down and it's horizontal and it's perpendicular to your window, you bring your Mecco shades down or your Venetian blinds or whatever, because there's no other way of stopping the light to come in. Or don't have windows on the east and west elevations. So what do? We make those the narrow side of the building. As always, as our buildings are rectangular and they're narrow, those sides are most often opaque. So we benefit from that. So that was passive. And then these are some of the statistics from the metrics. What is it? This is an office system panel, and that's interesting too. So you have these cubicles. Everybody knows what an office cubicle looks like? So how tall are they usually? They're usually 6 feet. You can get them 4 feet, or 5 feet, or 6 feet, or 7 feet. But if you want that light to refract from the solar shading device up to the ceiling and then come back down on your desk surface so that you have a sense of working in sunlight, you don't want a tall cubicle. So you can have the cubicle part be at 4 or 5 feet and then a piece of glass. So you can still have your privacy, and maybe there's some upper cabinets and things. But these numbers here are the amount of light on the surface in both conditions. And you'd have to look at it closely to understand what it's really trying to say. But you get more sunlight on a desktop surface when you keep those partitions down. It's kind of logical. This is, there is a component of replication that we have. If we figured this out and it works and it gives us the maximum efficiency, shouldn't we do it over? Now, it's not to say that every building needs to look the same, but shouldn't we take the same model that gives us that high energy efficiency and that high daylighting efficiency and the water efficiency and replicate it? So that's what we do. So from a massing point of view, a lot of our buildings are similar. They're long rectangles, and they're probably 4 to 6 stories tall. And that's, like I think Beth said, lower story buildings are more efficient. And then, what do we got over here? This is some more. Let's keep going here, huh? So what this is the block school, I believe, and so it just talks about 100% stormwater filtration, and then 46% water use down. So we added 100% water filtration, and we lowered the water usage by 46%. We lowered the energy usage by 75%. We lowered the construction waste by 88%, because we recycle as much as we can. I mean, we'll call out materials that are part of the construction, the crates that all the porcelain fixtures come in, or wood crates, and we'll take that wood and we'll use it in a room on a wall, and it's an aesthetic. Daylighting views, 98%. Okay, Omega Center. So again, this project kind of redefined our firm. It redefined, it was the first living building. And this is the campus over here. and it's on a dot here that you can't see, but that's Rhinebeck, New York. It's in Rhinebeck, New York. The Omega Center for Sustainable Living, I can't read that. Hold on. No, that ain't gonna work either. I'm sorry for that. Let me see if I can bring that down. So it's a 6,250 square foot building. There's 38,000 gallons per day savings of water. 40 gallons average. Anyway, that's going to take too long. But because of the water element outside, and oh, that slide's not in here. There's another slide that is going to answer your question. And you'll get to it when you see it in the next group. But we put 36-inch diameter perforated plastic pipe over 2 acres underneath the parking lot. And that's the water filtration system. That's the biomembrane. So it's under the parking lot. It goes into the ground. It's the last stage, but it purifies the water and then brings it down and just it's permeable into the ground underneath there, under the 2 acres. What else can I do here? Okay, 98% of the building is daylight. Percent of the building that is daylit is 98%. It gets natural daylighting to it. Percentage of energy supplied by on-site renewable energy is 100%. Precipitation managed on-site, 100%. And percent of construction waste diverted from landfill is 99%. So it all stays on site. We find ways of reusing of those materials. Okay, what do you want to do?
I'm going to say I looked at the rest of his slides, and it goes deeper into how do you look at every aspect of a commercial building, water, energy, transportation, keeping it, again, reusing everything, minimizing material cost. This whole presentation will be online, so you can actually see all of these.
Okay, great.
So you're not going to miss it. If you'd like to preview it, you can actually go through that on your laptops tonight, but I think we probably hit the limit of your ability.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So what I do want to just say in a closing comment about the water part, there are mechanisms, and if you ever say the word electrocoagulation to Dan Hendrickson, he'll talk to you for about 3 hours. But
I can do an elevator speech.
There you go. But there are there's new equipment that is out there that can guarantee pure water from sewer. And all we need to do is have the foresight and the emotional stomach to do that. I mean, the UT didn't do us any favors about 10 years ago when it coined that lovely phrase.
But now it's pure water.
But now it's pure water.
It could have been shower to flower.
Shower to flower, there you go. That would have been better.
Any key questions here for Phil? What you obviously have is one of the smartest architects in town doing this work today, himself and the firm. So let's ask a couple of, if you've got any pending.
We got one here.
Okay, go right here.
Have questions, overall questions, or?
Sure, go ahead for the whole group if you like.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just, is this working?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Hold it close.
I was just wondering, it seems to me that if you, from a residential standpoint at least, if you had, if you were off-grid, that you would save, you have a community that's off-grid, you would save a tremendous amount of cost of transmission lines, of power substations, major transmission lines, power plants. And so I was wondering what people think of the possibility for off-grid in the future.
if I could make a stab at that.
Any of our speakers.
Yeah, if I got one. So my strategy and all that, and part of some of the slides are about planning, net zero planning, which we didn't get to, but so if the school in the neighborhood has the water treatment and the PV on the school property, on the roof of the school, in the fields underneath, it can handle the entire neighborhood. It can provide net zero water and net zero PV for a neighborhood. Now you have another neighborhood with another school, and you do it again. And it's microgrid, and it's localized water treatment. And the costs of those systems are ever coming down for water. And for me, that's a no-brainer. And, you know, there's a couple of areas in California that tried it.
Sounds a little bit like what GBC was talking about when Dan Cott talked about eco-districts, to look at an entire community and say, how do you look at the throughput of water and energy and building materials in the whole neighborhood, and say, how do we make the whole system more efficient?
That's the new term for that kind of a thing. It's called an eco-district, and there actually are some slides in there if you want to go forward and look at them as well. But it is about empowering politically. The biggest part of an eco-district is the community connectivity. It's really about, I mean, we did one out in PB. I don't know how many have heard about that, but AIA and U.S. Green Building Council and a number of people and the community groups in PB got together, and they got a grant, and they studied this stuff, and they have now submitted for a formal eco-district status. And that has been picked up by some of the councilmen, and they are looking into that for their own council districts. So these are things that, again, it's political. There's a lot of naysayers out there that don't believe that there's a climate change. They don't believe that, you know, everything's not just the way it was.
They're not allowed in this room. Eric?
So you had talked about the importance of a life cycle perspective to buildings like this. And I was wondering if you could explain what the importance of then is in managing the information flow from planning through design, through build, through operation and maintenance. You have a lot of systems, say a 50-year building life. How do you keep it all straight, and how do you keep it so that the owner is going to know he's getting a good return on investment over the life cycle?
Well, certainly for commercial buildings, there's facilities management, and companies, corporations who are in the business of doing what they do, but they also have an operations maintenance facility that maybe manages 20, 30, 100 buildings. Those are very sophisticated operations, and they have identified as a facilities group the things that break down, the things that need maintenance, the light bulbs, the fluorescent. Remember, you'd have to stock a dozen fluorescent lights because you knew one of them was going to go out, and you had to do that. So when do you know when to order a fluorescent light? So there is new software, if you like computers, worst friend. But the software now that allows you to manage all of that. And in fact, we can in our design, because we now know, okay, I've just drawn 100 light fixtures in the ceiling of that room. I know that there's two lamps per fixture, and I know they have a 10,000 hour life expectancy. So I can, through an analysis, tell the owner and their facilities department that in March of 2020, they're going to need to replace those lights. Now, if you do that for furniture and carpet and other kinds of disposable things that are subject to the wear and tear of human interaction, you can prescribe that. So, there was a term in our industry called deferred maintenance, which means I know there's a roof up there, and we put the roof in 25 years ago, and I haven't put a dime in it since, so I know I'm going to have to replace that roof, but I don't have the money or the wherewithal to do that, so I'm going to put that in a category called deferred maintenance until it leaks. And then it's going to leak in a rainstorm, and it's going to get your furniture all wet, and you know that. So we want to try to be smarter. We want smart buildings. I mean, these are all in their own way smart buildings. So as we get our buildings smarter, we have more sensors. I mean, I had a fantasy that there would be a day when you'd have a building and you'd have the foundation of the building and you'd have sensors at the foundation of the building. And then one day your building calls you up on the phone or sends you an email. Your building sends you an email and it says, you know, there was a 2.5 earthquake last night and it actually settled the corner, left west corner of your building by 1/8 of an inch. Would you like me to fix that for you? It's all possible. And it's all sustainable. Okay.
Terrific. I really want to thank Beth, Phil, Bill. You guys had a graduate level course on net zero buildings tonight, right? Thank them all, would you? If you do want to see the rest of Phil's presentation, you can click through. There's, again, about 30 more slides there if you want to see it tonight, but it will go up on the website.
Thank you for not boring them with my presentation.
And one other commercial, it's a little bit off track for us, but he's also one of our greatest supporters out there. There's a gentleman named Mark Victor Hansen who studied with Buckminster Fuller back at Southern Illinois University. He's going to be here next week on Wednesday evening for a special evening. He is one of the leading authors on the planet, has the most successful book series ever in the self-help realm. You probably all have a Chicken Soup for the Soul out there, and he's going to talk about the abundance. Bucky talked about the abundance of solar. He's going to talk about why everybody ought to have solar on their rooftop, and he is a motivational speaker. It's not his specialty, but if you want to come hear one of the true phenomena as an author and as a motivational guy, Mark is here, and I'm thrilled he's going to be here next week. So we invite you back for that, and then Rob Anderson the following week. With that, thank you all for staying long. Appreciate you having here. Thank all of our speakers. Great evening.